Welcome back to the review, ladies and gentlemen. This is CBB Review's flagship podcast. My name is Brendon Hodges. It's episode 15 of this first season resurrection of the review. If you guys remember our first couple episodes, we said it's a resurrection. This is it's not brand new. They had this before, but we brought it back to life, and it's been doing well so far. Thank you guys for your support, by the way, when it comes to that. Big episode today because, well, we've mentioned it in a couple of the other past episodes. It's getting close to that time of the year where rivalries really start to heat up. It's a rivalry day. We're talking Duke, North Carolina, Kansas, Missouri, me versus Matt Majinski when it comes to trivia. And we'll have two writers on today, Steve Kirck and Sam Bass, both coming back on the program to discuss that and a few other things as well. Before we do that, though, I'm gonna go ahead and get into my starting five. And some of these rivalries that we are going to talk about today still hold the same amount of weight even when the teams aren't performing all that well. This year especially, we've seen teams like Kentucky not perform well and Duke as well. But there's a reason why certain rivalries, and I'm going to focus on Duke, North Carolina, there are sayings that go around saying it always delivers, and it just echoes throughout the history of the rivalry. It always delivers. Because even when these two teams are down, the games are just ridiculously good. They just had a game last weekend. I believe it was, I don't have the score right next to me, but I believe it was a single-digit game down to the wire. The last two times they had played prior to that were before the pandemic happened, and they both, well, the one came down to the wire. Duke came back from like 14 down in the second half, the last 5 minutes of the game. Trey Jones throws a ball off the rim, buzzer beater to tie to go into overtime. Then a similar play where he misses the free throw, not on purpose, throws it up, and Wendell Moore puts it back for the win against a North Carolina team that was ravaged with injuries and really shouldn't have had any business winning that game, but we're in it because it's Duke, North Carolina. And then the second game, you got the folklore hero of Justin Robinson, who you guys probably still don't know, even though his dad was a famous NBA player, and he had probably the best game of his collegiate career against North Carolina the second time around. But there's just so many other names that come to mind when you think of these two schools. Obviously, Michael Jordan, before he was Michael Jordan at UNC, and Christian Laettner, Shane Battier, Kyrie Irving, even though he only played like 2 games at Duke or something like that, Tyler Hansbrough, Grant Hill. There are so many good players, so many good moments from the rivalry, and it'll keep going, even though you have a year where Duke's not as good, and really they're struggling so much so that it's questionable if they'll make the tournament this year. And North Carolina is just kind of like, like they're on par. It's not a great season, better than last year, obviously, but they aren't really turning any heads as far as I'm concerned. It is still, though, the best rivalry in college basketball. It will be, and I can't wait for round 2 this year. And with that, we'll go ahead and bring in Sam Bass and Steve Kirck on this rivalry-themed episode, guys. I was on Twitter last night looking for our last topic to go off of, and the boss man, Matt Majinski, my arch nemesis on this program, who hasn't shown up all that often after his last appearance. I wonder why. Probably because I've been shredding him at trivia like everybody else. He answered this tweet in regards to your favorite teams divvy up 100 like fandom points between all your favorite teams. And obviously he is just a mess. He's a big Seton Hall fan, the Washington football team. I think he had the Yankees with like 2 because just to put that out of spite. And then he answered the question again, this time, though, with rivalry points. So he took, I believe, Seton Hall and divvied up their biggest rivalries with 100 points. So I sent this to you guys before the show today. I believe I sent it last night. You have 100 rivalry points to spread out among, I said top 5. Sam went a bit overboard for whatever reason, probably because he just got back to college and he's feeling like a big shot. But I said top 5 rivalries. We'll start with Sam because he went above and beyond and did spread the love to 7 of them. So Sam, we'll start with you. How did you spread out your 100 rivalry points?
So actually, while you were talking, doing your starting 5, I shredded it down to a starting 6. So we're getting closer. I don't think I have time to make it 5, but 6 is as close as I'll go. We'll start. I gave 10 points to each of Michigan State and Michigan, and then I gave 10 to UCLA, Arizona. Both are solid rivalries. They'll make headlines, but it's not something where you're like, oh, these teams hate each other. And then you go down a little bit. You have Georgetown and Villanova, which is a storied rivalry. Not recently, Georgetown hasn't really been that good as of late, as good as Villanova's been, because Villanova's really built a program. Jay Wright's built an amazing program, but there's still some hatred there. And then 15 for Indiana and Purdue as well, both in close proximity, both have storied programs. I got 20 for Kentucky Louisville. They don't play. They're not in the same conference, but there is a lot of tension when those two teams play out of conference every year. Didn't happen this year, but it every year there is tension with them. And then obviously my big one, 30 for UNC Duke. You mentioned before. My first article I ever wrote for CBB Review was why UNC and Duke was the best rivalry in sports, and I felt passionate about it then, and I feel passionate about it now. That is a very good rivalry. It's very close every time, and they're not that far away from each other. Just I believe it's 18 miles down Tobacco Road, and those two programs have strong disdain for each other, to put it lightly. And I think that's obvious that they're the best rivalry in college basketball, and in my opinion, sports.
Interesting you mentioned the Indiana one, especially since they have that 4-team, I guess, like round robin. I don't even know if it's round robin, but it's a big event. The 4 major Indiana schools play each other. And I really didn't pay attention to that until this year. So happy to see you have that on your rivalries list. Steve, you also have 100 points. Let's see if you followed the rules, unlike somebody else who's here, and only picks 5 rivalries, even though we do like spreading the wealth here. It's a minor infraction, Sam, so I won't dock you too many points on this. It's your first day back in a while. You just moved back to college. I understand you've been busy, but you have to learn to follow the directions now. You're in school, my man. What are you? You're a sophomore now, right?
I'm a freshman.
That makes a lot of sense. Anyway, we go from the younger statesman to the elder statesman. Steve, your 100 rivalry points go to who?
All right, I did come up with 5. I did break it down pretty interestingly. So I'll give you the 5 rivalry games that I came up with, and then I'll give you the point total for each. So Sam mentioned 2 of mine, Kentucky, Louisville. I'm a big Kentucky fan, as you know. I did include Duke and North Carolina. I mean, it's obvious that you got to include that one. And you know, I go back to Austin Rivers making that big shot in the Dean Dome, and I think Jeff Capel made a 3 from half court, to win a game too. So those are 2 memorable ones. The other 3 I didn't hear mentioned. I went with Illinois, Missouri, the rivalry battle between those 2 teams. Then you got the battle for Cincinnati between Xavier and Cincinnati, so I included that one. And then a little close to home for me, a little Ivy League battle, Yale-Harvard. I went with that one as my 5th and final one to include. Now, when I broke down the points, it's going to be a little different. I went 1 point each for Cincy and Xavier and Yale and Harvard, just because I wanted to leave a bunch of points for some of my big old rivalry games. So then I put 18 for Yale-Harvard. Put that 3rd on my list. I live right near Yale. I root for Yale. So I included that one because I think that's a big one to include from the Ivy League. Went with 20 for Duke, Carolina, and then I went with 60 for Kentucky and Louisville just because I'm a huge Kentucky fan. And as Sam mentioned, they only play once a year. It's always around Christmas. And I tell you what, it either makes someone's holiday or it ruins someone's holiday. So when you threw that into the mix, I gave it the bulk of the points and gave it 60.
That is ambitious. I don't mind you putting the Ivy League in there because it seems like every year that I watch the tournament closely, it started with Harvard, I think, beating, I don't remember who they beat in like 2014. They upset someone big. And every year after that, it seemed like an Ivy League bid owner won a game. Yale with Makai Mason upsetting Baylor a couple of years ago. That was the Ivy League teams are very competitive, and I've made it.
Cornell got to the Sweet 16 a couple of years ago.
They did.
In 2010, they got to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, and it's always a competitive tournament. I actually, a guy from home, I think he still plays at Harvard. Cale Catching, shout out Cale Catchings at Harvard if you are still there. very diverse set of rivalries. We won't get to cover all of them today because there are only a few that people know and love as much as we do. But we'll go ahead and move on to our first break of the day. Well done with the rivalries, guys. We'll touch on some more of that stuff later. When we come back, though, stories since we last saw you, the biggest stories from college basketball this week, as well as our second topic of the day involving one of the 4 postseason tournaments that would have been going on in a normal year. Until then, though, we'll be right back. This is The Review. Stick with us. Back on The Review, Brendon Hodges along with Sam Bass and Steve Kirck making their returns to CBB Review's flagship podcast after either a very short period of time in terms of Steve or a very long period of time in turning the backwards hat-clad Sam Bass. You're looking a little like is your idol Ken Griffey Jr., Sam? I know you're a baseball guy, but...
I'm a pitcher, so I'm going to have to go with no. I actually got ready to practice, so I didn't want you guys to see all the hat head going on, so I just took the hat and threw it on backwards. I'm sure that would have gotten a lot of clicks because it looks fantastic, but I couldn't let the premier part of our...
Can you let it out for like a second?
Oh, man. Just for the clicks. Here we go. Yeah, it's looking sharp right now.
It's not that bad, honestly. I was hoping it'd be a little bit worse. Anyway, though, we're back here on The Review. Stories since we last saw you coming up. We lead stories of the week, very diverse as well as in terms of, we had a diverse set of rivalries these guys talked about in the last block. We have a diverse set of stories, including one from the Ivy League, actually, Steve. So unintended connection there, but that's our last story in this segment. To start, though, we'll start with news in the Big Ten. The conference decided to make the decision to move the Big Ten tournament from Chicago to Indianapolis. Everybody's going to Indianapolis these days. It's a popular place, I guess. They'll do so to provide more centralized testing and medical protocol efficiencies during the pandemic. The tournament will still be slated to play from March 10th to March 14th. Guys, how popular is Indianapolis right now? And would you guys ever want to go there for a basketball tournament? Well, we'll start with Steve.
I'll tell you what, there's 68 teams that would love to be going to Indianapolis for a basketball tournament in about a month. So, yes, I think that was probably a smart move. You're going to wind up in Indianapolis anyway for a majority of those teams from the Big Ten. You're looking about getting 8 or 9 teams, maybe 10 into the tournament. So to start the quarantine or, have your tournament there early kind of makes sense. Someone else might have jumped the gun and beat you to it if you didn't jump into the fray to move to Indianapolis. So I think it makes sense. And think about it. They've probably got 3 teams that are, Final Four worthy. So Michigan, Illinois, Ohio State, maybe somebody else. They could be looking at spending 5 weeks in Indianapolis. So they're going to need to like it if they're going to be there that long.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to agree. I think that Indianapolis right now is becoming the college basketball capital of the world. They didn't intend for it, but it's just the circumstances. And now everyone wants to be in Indiana. And it seems like what's going to happen is the teams who lose in their conference will stay if they do wind up having a bubble for the tournament, which I think they're moving towards. You can correct me if I'm wrong. They'll stay in the college basketball bubble for the NCAA tournament, which I think is a very smart decision by the Big Ten. I don't see anything wrong with this decision, only positive. So well done.
I will say it has been confirmed there will be a bubble. That came out a while ago. I'm not sure when the bubble actually starts being put together, though. So that will be interesting to see if they'll be allowed to stay in Indianapolis for that time or if they have to do testing back at their own campuses and then come back to Indianapolis. That'd be a bit of a hassle, though. Next story, though, comes out of Valparaiso. They announced that they will be dropping their mascot, the Crusaders, the school mascot and all logos associated with that term, because it's been said to have been embraced by hate groups. Didn't realize this until I saw this story this weekend. The decision does come after a decades-long debate that had really intensified because groups like the KKK had begun using symbols and words that were synonymous or could be related to the term Crusader. The students, faculty, and student senates each passed resolutions calling for the change, and the university's alumni board of directors supported reassessing the appropriateness of the team name. Guys, I'm going to keep this one a little light considering the solemn nature of this story, but what was your favorite moments from the Valparaiso Crusaders history now that they'll be changing their name? We'll go with
Yeah,
Sam. And
Drew, right?
actually, go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
It's got to be Bryce Drew, right?
That was what I was thinking, and I'm pretty sure that's what Sam is thinking too.
A little before
Is there-
Sam's time.
Is there
It is
any
before.
Is there any other Valparaiso moment that's really worthy besides that? I know my stuff.
That's
It's
more
the
me,
only
I'm
commercial-worthy moment because I believe there was a Geico commercial where they reenacted that play, and it was. I don't know if it was a Geico commercial or something else, but they had the Bryce Drew play drawn up, and it was either the actual footage and then they just shot something into the background or something like that. But definitely the biggest Valpo moment that I think anybody ever knows because it's the only really big Valpo moment that anyone's ever seen. Anyway, though,
if you ask high school coaches across the country, they probably have that played, in their end of game situations. And I'm sure
everyone, I think we had that play in high school. I was the quarterback per se on the baseline, and I just had to chuck the play. I was a swingman on varsity. I swung JV varsity sophomore year, and I think the only reason they had me on the varsity team is because I played quarterback on the football team. We didn't throw it much, but this one, it was just throwing it. It got tipped to the best shooter, and yeah, it's the Bryce Drew play. So a staple. Thank you, Bryce Drew, for making that a staple in basketball at all levels. Final story from the week, the Ivy League. Everyone loves the Ivy League. Their Council of Presidents approved the opportunity for current senior student athletes to play an additional season as graduate students, according to a statement sent to those student athletes on Thursday. Now, the statement makes it clear that the rule change is only a one-time waiver because of the Ivy League canceling its fall and winter seasons. Basically, won't be a permanent change. Now, there's a reason this is such a big deal because the Ivy League hasn't allowed either athletic redshirts or permitted graduate students to play on athletic teams. Around 20 Ivy League men's basketball players have graduated and transferred to another school since 2015, and more than 20 Ivy League men's basketball players are currently in the NCAA transfer portal. So, guys, another change made due to COVID-19 and one that's against the grain for a very traditional conference like the Ivy League. Sam, what do you think?
I think it should stay this way. I think that if you have an extra year of eligibility, you should be able to use it when you're in grad school. The Ivy League is losing talent by not permitting graduate players to play on their athletic teams. They're losing guys to the transfer portal. Honestly, people are scared to redshirt if you're an Ivy League because then you really only have 3 years to play. So you might play on an injury. You might decide to play even though you're not ready to play at that level. And it's strict to the Ivy League. I think that the Ivy League needs to stay like this and really become more talked about in college basketball. It's a slept-on conference, and I think the more talent you have there, the more people talk about it and recognize.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I'm gonna praise him and I'm gonna criticize him a little bit at the same time. I think it's a no-brainer for the Ivy League to do this. I think their 8-semester rule is a little bit archaic and has led to many transfers, grad transfers to go get a 5th year in somewhere else. So I do applaud him for making this decision. I guess I'll criticize him only on the angle that I'm assuming this is across all sports and not just basketball. So the spring semester has obviously started, as Sam knows. So, if you're a spring sport athlete, not knowing that this was going to happen, you forced a lot of kids to make a decision as to whether to come to school this semester or not to try to maintain your eligibility, especially on the spring sports side, with baseball, lacrosse, softball, and tennis and all those sports. So, there were, kids who had to make a decision as to whether to go to school this year or not knowing that this rule was going to come into play. So the timing of it, I think, could have been done, a little bit earlier. And I guess my other question is this really just for the seniors, or is this for anybody, in these 3 years and will go on for the next 3 years, or is it just a 1-year thing for the current seniors? I'm not sure, whether that has been, clarified or not. And if you mentioned those 20 kids that are, have entered the portal, you know what, if I got my college degree and I got a chance to play a 5th year somewhere else at a bigger school, I'm probably going to take advantage of that. So, the timing of it to me was just something that I think if they were going to go this route, they needed to do a little sooner to give the spring athletes as much information to make, that important life decision as soon as they could.
Well, plenty of questions to go around when it comes to that. We'll keep tabs on that story as well. But for now, those were the biggest stories in college basketball since we last saw you. We'll move on to our second topic of the day. Not a tournament that I was really aware of before yesterday. The collegeinsider.com postseason tournament, otherwise known as the CIT. Anybody here watch the CIT?
Is that the one that ends in the best 2 out of 3 at the end?
I still don't know, even though I looked at it last night. Anyway, it's been canceled for this season. That was also announced yesterday. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, a statement reads, there will be no collegeinsider.com postseason tournament in 2021. The safety and welfare of student athletes, coaches, administrators, and fans is paramount. Therefore, we believe it is prudent to not hold our event this season. This was an easy decision. So this is one of the 4 postseason tournaments in men's college basketball, obviously. The NCAA tournament, the NIT, the CIT. I don't even know what the 4th one is. And I didn't.
CBI.
That is what it is. Yes, the College Basketball Invitational. The only 2 people really, I feel like pay attention to, at least in this circle, though, are the NIT and the NCAA tournament. But the reason why I think this is important for today, guys, is that the CIT is made up exclusively of mid-majors. So lower tier schools, we don't necessarily hear a lot about who now won't get the chance to play in the postseason if they don't make the NIT or NCAAs. So first question, we'll start with Steve. How does this CIT affect those mid-major schools, do you think?
Yeah, I think it affects them, from the angle that, if you can get in a couple extra games, one against seniors, one more time to put on a uniform, and it gets your underclassmen, a couple extra practices and, just kind of prepares you for the next year, gets the coaching staff longer looks at it. So, from that vantage point, I think, it's certainly worthy and worthwhile for the mid-majors to do it. But I can certainly see why the CIT, made the decision that they made. We saw a lot of college football teams decline bowl bids just because of everything they had to go through during the pandemic season to get to the finish line of the regular season. Did they really want to continue that for another month to play one more football game? Obviously, basketball isn't waiting a month. It's maybe only waiting 4 or 5 days. But I can see some schools, kind of making that same decision and saying, we spent so much energy and mental, anguish, so to speak, to get to the finish line of a conference tournament that, we just we need a pause, so to speak, and, kind of move on to next year. So I can see where the CIT did it. I hope that the other ones, don't follow suit, because I think it's great to have as many games as we can. But I can see a scenario where maybe it's just the NIT and maybe even it's only like a 16 or 2014 field instead of a full field. We'll have to see how that plays out over the next month or so.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that the college football example was a really good one. I actually had that written down. You saw teams, they used so much effort with the pandemic, testing, staying safe. These kids couldn't see their families for months. Like the same thing with college basketball. What's the point of playing in the CIT? What's that going to do for you? I mean, obviously you want to get the seniors a chance to play again, but I think that the CIT canceled it now. But if they were to host it and ask teams to come, they wouldn't have a full show out. I think that it's the smart decision. It's the inevitable decision.
Well, it's interesting. And point that Steve mentioned about getting these players another chance to play. I wonder how this may affect the tenacity of different conference tournaments, especially in the mid-major ranks. You're going to get at-large bids out of those Power 5, Power 6, and we'll even include the A10 in there because they're really a glorified Power 7th conference. But these other mid-major schools will probably have a lot more to play for now because they want to get to the NCAA tournament because that's what their goal always is. And I think we're going to see a lot more tenacity and a lot more fight in these conference tournaments. And maybe even it'll make the mid-major tournaments that much more interesting than those from the Power 5.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the other aspect, don't forget about the NIT. If you're, in a one bid league, if you win your conference, you get an automatic bid to the NIT. So, someone who might be, leading, say the America East for all season and it slip up during the conference tournament, they kind of know that they've got the NIT in their back pocket. Is that going to happen? And are they going to know that before their conference tournament? So it would be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, if we're talking other tournaments, Duke and Kentucky better hope that the NIT is still going on because Otherwise, they're going to go postseason basketball just in their conference tournaments.
They better win 3 games or they're not going to play in a postseason.
You know, Sam, I appreciate the kind gesture you just made to Steve there. I think Kentucky's postseason hopes are over. I'm just going to throw that out there right now. A very hot take. Actually, that's foreshadowing for next episode. I didn't put this in. I actually might put this in at the last minute, if you guys are okay with it. When we come back, there's a segment on a certain sports show on NBC called Higher Register. It's the hottest take that you can think of in the moment. We're going to do this off the cuff if you guys are okay with this. I'm interested in seeing what you guys come up with for a Higher Register take, and you have to do it like, I believe, or something like that. You know, you get what I mean. You go like a higher register, a higher octave with your voice when you try to make a point you don't actually believe, but you think it'd be a great hot take. We'll do that coming up next, along with our 3-point play. It's a little easier this time around. You're welcome. We'll go over the standings of that and see if you guys can catch up to the leaders. Until then, though, we'll take a break. Be right back. This is The Review. Back on The Review, a little different in terms of this block. We weren't all prepared for it this time because I just came up with something out of the blue. Because I said hot take, we're going to do a hot take segment. Back here on The Review, Sam Bass, Steve Kirck joining me in this C block. And guys, like I said in the last block, Higher Register is a segment where you're throwing a bone out there. You're making a prediction that you don't necessarily believe in totality, but hey, there's a big chance that, you know, maybe the SEC doesn't get through to the Sweet 16, really anybody, because they've been beating up on each other. Alabama hasn't looked all that good as of late. Something like that. I'm not going to give a hot take, but if I was, that would probably be what it is. I don't know if anybody in the SEC will get to the Sweet 16 or they'll get through to this round of 32. I don't think the SEC can compete against other big conferences, though. Anyway, though, we'll start with Sam and give Steve a little more time to work because he was rubbing his temples during the break. So, Sam, you seem very ready for this, the Higher Register segment, the debut of the Higher.
I got to warm up a little bit because I'm not going to make a lot of people happy. But earlier, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I mentioned in our CBB review group chat that Ohio State would be a 1 seed, and then they beat up on another Big Ten team, and Ariel decided to comment on the post saying he called that Ohio State would be a 1 seed. And then he said, I thought they wouldn't make the tournament at all, basically giving me crap, even though I made the right prediction. I'm not only going to stick with Ohio State being the 1 seed. I think Ohio State will compete for a national championship. They will beat one of Gonzaga or Baylor to make the national championship and play in that game. That's my hot take.
Well, you didn't necessarily go Higher Register there, but I guess we'll take it. You actually believe in that, so you know what? That's fine. The Higher Register thing can come in another day. Steve, you can have a Higher Register hot take, or you can just have a regular old hot take. Feel free.
I'll go with a hot take, one that I don't think is going to happen, but I'll go with it, that both Kentucky and Duke will win their respective conference tournaments, but they will play in a play-in game, and that will be the highest-rated game of the NCAA tournament.
Wow, now for not knowing for being going off the seat of your pants there, that's pretty specific. Okay, I like it. We'll see if those come true. Note those down, guys, and we'll see if those actually come true. Anyway, though, we'll move on to the 3-point play. It's my favorite segment, guys, and you know why. I explained some alternative rules that have come to mind to Sam before Steve got on the call today. Most of it's the same. 3 basic questions, college basketball questions. That equals 3 points. That equals the 3-point play. Now, changes that have been made recently. Thank you, Matt Majinski, for telling me this is too easy because now everybody only gets 1 mulligan to turn it into a multiple choice question. Sorry, Sam. I know you're pretty up there on the leaderboard, but you're going to have to work for it this time. Now, here's the other thing. I don't like wasting 4-point play questions because they're really good. And I feel like it's an okay one today, but I still don't want to waste it. So if you get at least 2 of the 3 questions right, you get a chance at the 4-point play question. So you can have at least a 3-point chance at a 3-point play. So today, one of the questions, yet again, will not be able to be turned into a multiple choice question. That is question number 3. So you cannot use a mulligan on question 3. Are you guys ready?
Let's go.
Let's do it.
All right, well, today's topic, we've been talking about rivalries. Today's topic is Duke versus UNC. So hopefully, I would hope you guys can do at least decent at this one, but we'll see. Question 1. Now, the ACC, it was founded in 1953. Duke, UNC, they're two of the major players in the ACC. But since the conference's founding, what percentage of ACC titles have either Duke or North Carolina won?
Are we talking conference tournaments or are we talking regular season titles?
Just conference titles. I believe it takes into account both, is what this question did. So we're looking for a percentage.
You need a number from us.
Yeah, yes, this is a numbers question, Sam.
And
See,
do we get like a ballpark, or do you want us to get it right on the head? Because that seems difficult.
Well, if you use your mulligan, I'm going to expect you to get it right on the head. If you don't, I'll give you a ballpark of 2%. You have to be within 2%.
2%.
Yes. I don't pull any
I'll
punches
take
here.
a mulligan on this one.
Okay, you're going to take a mulligan on this one. Steve, are you going to take a mulligan on this one?
I will not take a mulligan on this one. I was actually going to hope Sam went first, and then I was going to ask if I could go higher, lower, prices right version. But I'll throw a number out there. I'll say 47%.
All right, Sam Bass, your choices are 45%, 60%, 65%, or 77%.
Let's go with 60%.
You're both wrong. It is 77%
Wow.
of the conference titles. And yes, I do believe that is combining the two conference, like regular season and conference tournament. It always does seem like either Duke or North Carolina wins the conference tournament regardless. And then in regards to
you're leaving
regular
out my Virginia Cavaliers here. You got to put some respect on our name. Thank you.
Here's a hot take
Another
for
team
you.
that's won the
Your
most
Virginia
league
Cavaliers will get bounced in the second round of the tournament again. Anyway.
Again, we're reigning national champions.
They are reigning national.
You are reigning national champions after falling in the worst upset of NCAA tournament history.
The only thing I heard from that is reigning national champions, and
You're
okay
a foul call. You're a non-foul call away from not being reigning national champions, sir. I was watching that Auburn-Virginia game.
And you're saying it wasn't a foul?
No, it was definitely a foul, but would I have called it? Probably not, because you let the players play in the last minute of the game. He may have kicked his leg out a little bit there.
You also let him land when he shoots.
Hey, man, I'm just saying, you're trying to contest a shot. I'm not going to say it's the ref's fault Auburn lost that game, but if it's me, I want the players to play it out, and I want to swallow my whistle with 30 seconds left in the game. Anyway, after that very rude statement from the one Virginia fan that I have a couple classmates that went to UVA as well, but that's besides the point.
Does anyone
Steve, it looks like
that UMBC game was a second round game? It's a first round game.
No, it is weird that they say the second round is the round of 64 just because it's a playing game. It's the first round. NCAA, the round of 64 is the first round. There's a reason that you're called the play-in games, and then you say it's the second round? No, absolutely not. Fix it, please.
It's not the first round.
It's not like you have a crafty name for the round of 32. It's just called the round of 32. Say that's the second round. You have the first round. You can say it's the round of 64. The second round is the round of 32. Then you have the Sweet 16. Don't say the play-in games are round one. That's so stupid.
100%.
Anyway, we're down to 3 minutes here. We got to go quick before this Zoom limit hits us up here. Question 2. Now, while this rivalry, UNC Duke, puts us on the edge of our seats in the regular season, doesn't really get the chance to do so in the postseason. In fact, these two teams have never played each other in the NCAA tournament. They almost did in 1991, though. It was the closest they got when both made it to the Final Four. Unfortunately for us, Kansas would beat UNC and send them out of the tournament. Who coached that Kansas team against North Carolina? Well, Steve, I think, knows this, so I'll wait for him. Sam, I'll let you go first because I'm pretty sure Steve knows this.
I have no clue.
That's tough. Steve,
Roy
would you like to
Williams.
tell him? It was Roy Williams. I bet you're wishing you hadn't wasted your mulligan now, Sam. You don't even get a chance to get 3. You won't even get a chance at the 4-point play.
Nope.
Anyway, question 3. In February of 2015, Duke and North Carolina had an absolute fantastic game. 92-90, overtime thriller, really ugly overtime period, though. The game itself wasn't the most important thing about that day, though. It was overshadowed by an event that had happened earlier that week. What was that event? This is the one that you can't use your mulligan on.
What year again? I didn't hear you.
2015.
What was the date of the game?
I don't have the exact date. It was in February of 2015.
February 2015. Oh, man. Dead silence with less than a minute.
We got.
I got nothing. Say Valentine's Day because I got nothing.
No, I'm. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, gentlemen, I'm surprised you didn't get this one right. It was the death of Dean Smith. It was the first Duke North Carolina game after the death of Dean Smith. North Carolina ends up losing that game. It was very close. They couldn't get the win for their old coach. Unfortunately, none of you. Well, that's surprising. Honestly, none of you get the chance at the 4-point play. I got to tell you, Sam, I was a little disappointed in you today. You didn't even score a point. You're like
Rusty.
Matt Carter right now.
I'm rusty.
If you'd like to know what the 4-point play question was, though, a little bit of history for you. So in 2012, North Carolina was up 3 points with 14 seconds to go. They ended up losing that game because Tyler Zeller accidentally tipped in a Duke shot into his own basket, cutting their lead to 1. Then he missed one of his 2 free throws, and Duke nailed a 3-pointer for a 1-point victory. So North Carolina hasn't been lucky when it's come to playing Duke lately. We're about at our Zoom limit, though. We'll take our final break of the day and come back with the D Block game picks, along with these panelist stories to start your weekend after this break. We'll be back. This is The Review. About to close up shop here on The Review. Brendon Hodges alongside Steve Kirck and Sam Bass. We've had a lot of fun today. We got to yell at the NCAA a little bit about how they labeled the tournament. Sam had a great Virginia take. It's probably wrong because they're really, I don't think, no. Sorry, Sam, they're getting bounced early again this year. The championship year was a one-off. I'd like to mention also, I believe they almost lost to Bradley in similar fashion that they lost to UMBC that year they won the national championship.
You are completely wrong. You are completely wrong. It was Gardner-Webb.
That's even worse.
But we won. So
yes, you did win, but it was a little iffy there. Virginia.
And I also mentioned that we were one of 3 teams, 3 1 seeds in 2019 who were losing to the 16 seed at halftime, who turned around and won.
And you're proud of that?
I'm just saying we're fitting in.
This man says they're fitting in. Okay. I just need to settle this right now. Sam, Virginia is a roller coaster team. They always really struggle against really bad, not bad teams, but teams that they should be beating handily. In basketball, I think defense wins championships is not even a thing. Defense does not win championships in college basketball. I'm sorry. No. Maybe the one time because you were playing Texas Tech. If you were playing Michigan State, you definitely would have lost that game. That's my opinion. And I'll just leave it at that. Virginia's a roller coaster team. They're up and down, and their crests are decent, and then their troughs are terrible.
It was a great redemption story.
What?
If you want a great breakdown,
I didn't hear anything again. What did you say, Steve? We'll start with you there.
I'll say it was a great redemption story to lose the 116 game and then come back and win the national championship. That was a great redemption story.
And Sam, what did you say here?
If we want a full breakdown of Virginia basketball and everything since Tony Bennett was the coach, We could have a whole episode dedicated to that. I'm sure the people would love to hear my takes on Virginia basketball.
Maybe we'll do that at some point. I have been saying I'm going to do maybe over the off season, in between season 1 and season 2, we'll do like a series on different teams, and everybody can host a podcast on how their favorite team is the best team of the country. Even though I'm pretty sure Matt Waldman saying that Wofford is the best team in the country won't really go over that well with our fan base. I'll pitch that to the boss man and see what he thinks. I know he'll take like 5 episodes to describe Seton Hall, and Syracuse too. He'll get 2 because of that. Anyway, we wasted a couple minutes like that. We're back here on the review after that little outburst from Sam. It's his first day back, and he thinks that he's the boss here. Like, this is unbelievable. Stories to start your weekend coming up here. Our panelists, they're looking for a lot of things over the course of weekends, over the course of weeks, and there's a lot of college basketball to watch this weekend. At least there was until a lot of it got postponed or canceled due to COVID. From what there is left, though, our panelists have a story or maybe a couple stories they're looking forward to this weekend. We'll start with Sam Bass.
I'll start with what I believe is the biggest test for my perennial national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. That's when they host Indiana. Indiana is a streaky team, but they have Trace Jackson Davis who can give them a lot of trouble. And I think Ohio State is going to have to play at a top level to beat Indiana. And I think Indiana is still fighting for a bid in the NCAA tournament. That Big Ten is very competitive, and the bottom third of that league is still in play for a bid, which is crazy to me, but that's the way the conference is this year. So Indiana can give Ohio State some trouble. I'm looking forward to seeing how Ohio State fends them off.
Okay, first of all, you do know what the word perennial means, right?
If I could give you a definition right now, I'd probably be wrong, but I could say it.
Save yourself the embarrassment. Perennial means like every year they could be a national champion. Therefore, Ohio State basketball is not a perennial national championship contender.
They could be.
Just in football, yeah, not in basketball. So
I was going to say, he's got the wrong sport.
Yeah, you have the wrong sport. This is a basketball podcast. I know. You're trying to, what's the word? I'm like, suck up to me because I'm a football guy. It's not going to work, Sam. Virginia is a roller coaster team, and Ohio State is not a perennial powerhouse in college basketball. Steve, your stories to start the weekend.
All right, I got 3. I'll go through them quickly. I'll go with number 3 first. The Battle of the Big East, Creighton and Villanova. That'll be a hot matchup on Saturday. 2, does UConn get James Bouknight back? They are going to need him. They've lost 4 or 5. They're going to make an NCAA push. They're going to need him back starting this weekend. And I think my game of the week that I want to pay attention to the most is Sunday at 1:00. First Sunday without football in a long time. But Michigan returns to action after a pause, and they play at senior-laden Wisconsin. So not the easiest of matchups to come back with after being out for 2+ weeks. And, they were a top 4 team in the country, and, we'll have to see what the 2+ weeks away did for them. But a tough matchup at Wisconsin on Sunday at 1:00.
Well done, guys. Those are the panelist stories to start your weekend. Let's move on to some game picks. A couple, well, at least one is postponed as far as we know, that being SMU Wichita State. Thank you, Steve, for alerting me to that before the show today. We won't pick that one. We'll start with games going on Friday. And VCU has been in the game picks a lot lately just because they're playing a lot of competitive games. This one is not any different. They're playing St. Bonaventure, both of the teams top like half of the A10. VCU 7-2 in the A10, St. Bonaventure 8-2. Which one gets a leg up on the other? We'll start with Steve and go with Sam, and we'll keep that order throughout the entire segment.
Big matchup in the A10 for sure. I'm going to go with VCU on that one. St. Bonaventure fell to St. Louis in their last matchup. I think VCU gets them tonight. VCU.
I'm going to agree. I have VCU in this one as well. I think they're a more athletic and more disciplined team.
The only other game we have from Friday comes to us from Conference USA, the Louisiana Tech Bulldogs against the Alabama Birmingham Blazers. Like all these, I just want to put this out there, all these mythical like creatures like a dragon, like it makes me think of those really like bad movies where they bring in Godzilla to fight King Kong. Like that movie's coming out soon. It's going to be really bad. I don't know why the Blazer just makes me think of that, but it does. Not aside from that, the Bulldogs or the Blazers, Steve, who wins?
I'll give Sam another SAT to look up if you want to look up perennial before. I'll go with symmetry now. Went with VCU the first game. I'm going to go with UAB. Went with the three-letter similar team and to take UAB in this one.
Sam, do you know what symmetry means?
Not a math guy, but fortunately, I do know what symmetrical means. Yes, I do know symmetry. In fact, my pick is going to be symmetrical. I'm going UAB as well. They have a 2-game advantage in Conference USA, and I can see it sticking like that because they're clearly a leg up on everyone else. I think they're going to win their conference, honestly.
I would just like to tell the audience that we are not actually math nerds. Symmetry is, I believe, an elementary school concept. So at least we're smart enough to know what symmetry is, and we at least that 2 of us are smart enough to know what the word perennial means. Anyway, we'll move on to Saturday. Sam Bass's Drake Bulldogs. They are 19-1, and they are being disrespected because they're not in the rankings, and Loyola Chicago is at 22 in the rankings. They're 17-3. They played more games in the Missouri Valley than Drake has, so I guess they kind of deserve it. But this is a big matchup. It's a doubleheader this weekend that everybody's been looking forward to in the Missouri Valley. Steve, who takes it?
I'm going to make 2 picks here. They're both going to win one. They're both good enough to win a game. So they're going to split the series. So whoever wins Friday, the other one's going to win on Saturday. If someone sweeps, obviously, you could pretty much, give them the regular season crown because they're the 2 top teams in that league. So, all right, Loyola tonight, Drake on Saturday.
Who wins the conference? Who gets the bid? Let's leave it at that, because I have a feeling that if they split, only one of them is going to get a bid to the tournament, which is sad to say, but it's just how it works most of the time.
I'll disagree. I think they're both going to get a bid. I think if they both get to the conference championship game, they'll both get a bid.
Okay, that's fair.
I like that a lot. I think they both can get a bid. However, for this 2-game series, and I love the way Missouri Valley's doing these 2-game series back-to-back nights, it's just constant basketball. Give them both to my Drake Bulldogs.
You're insufferable. Oh my God.
I'm a huge fan of Drake. They got no respect early season. They finally got ranked, and they fell in game 2 of their series to Valpo. And I think they have a big bounce back series against the top team in the league. And Drake is gonna get more national recognition. Drake Bulldogs are for real this year.
All right, Sam, here's a question for you. Do you like Drake more or do you like Drake's cakes more?
Drake. I like Drake.
Okay.
There's only one Drake for me. There's only one Drake that I know, and that's Sir Francis Drake. He's the GOAT. Anyway, more action from Saturday. A ranked matchup in the Big 12. West Virginia taking on Oklahoma. 2 top 15 teams. And in a really crowded Big 12 this year, guys. Steve, who wins it?
There's only one team to pick on Valentine's weekend, and that's Huggy Bear, West Virginia.
I just left it at that. Okay.
I'm with you on this too. I think Oklahoma's a good team, but I think they're getting a little overrated at this point. They beat Alabama, who has been struggling. They have some good wins, but they're streaky. West Virginia is one of those teams in the Big 12 who I think can really – them and Texas, I think, are the 2 biggest contenders to fight with Baylor. I think West Virginia is very well coached, and they've shown that they can be consistent. I think West Virginia takes this one.
All right, moving on to the Big East. Not a lot of games to pick from the Big East this weekend, but there is one that really sticks out. It's Creighton and Villanova. Now, I think this game's going to be a lot closer than people may think because they're like, oh, Villanova, they're like the best team in the Big East. That's just how it works. They're ranked 5th in the nation. Yeah, Creighton's good, but yeah, they're kind of Creighton. But does anybody think there's a chance for an upset for the Blue Jays here? They've played everybody really well in the Big East, and they've won a lot more close games than Villanova has, at least to my eye. Steve?
Yeah, I think if Creighton wants to try to win a regular season crown, they need to win this game because they're already 3 back in the loss column, and to fall 4 back with limited time left to make that up is not a road you want to travel. But Villanova's hitting their stride. I think they're the clear class of the Big East, so I think Villanova wins this one.
I'm going to take the upset. I think Creighton went into the season really relying on Marcus Zagorowski, and now Denzel Mahoney's really stepping up. Christian Bishop's been playing well. They're so well-rounded, and although Villanova just lost, I think that Jay Wright still has some work to do with that team. It's not going to take one loss for him to just flip it around. I think a loss to Creighton will really spark the Wildcats, and they will win the conference, but I think Creighton takes this one.
And then finally, we mentioned this game a little while ago on Sunday. Wisconsin, senior-laden, taking on a Michigan team that's been off for 2 weeks, guys. Michigan, 3rd in the nation. They were undefeated for a while. They aren't now, and they've been off for 2 weeks. Will the rest have helped them, or will it have hurt them? Steve, we'll start with you.
I think it's going to hurt them. I'm going to take Wisconsin in this one. They're the 2+ weeks off. Coming back against a team like Wisconsin that's got, 3 senior starters and 2 fifth-year starters, that's not a team that you want to come back after, a long pause. If they come back against someone else, you can kind of get your feet wet, get back acclimated into playing. But a team with so much experience like Wisconsin is not the recipe, I think, for success for your first game back. So I'll take the mini upset with Wisconsin.
I'm going to agree for a few reasons. One, Wisconsin has home court advantage, which really doesn't help in a season like this. However, they're a team that relies on their jump shots. And when you see it at your home basket where you practice and where you play the majority of your games, you're used to shooting the ball in those hoops. Second of all, I forget the exact stat. I should have written it down, but after a pause, if you're playing a team in the top 50, I think the percent times people win after a pause against the top 50 team is less than 25% this season. So I don't think, especially on the road, Michigan's traveling, I think Wisconsin takes this, and I think they take it by a lot.
For all the takes you had today, that was probably the smartest thing you said, and you just did pull out a percentage for it. You saved your best for last. Well done, Sam, and well done, Steve, on your picks today, guys. Pleasure having you on. It's been a great episode, and we're going to close up shop here real shortly. I do want to do one last thing, though, and I'm not sure if you guys saw this bold type at the top of the game picks page. I did ask you to bring a game of the weekend that wasn't included on this list, and I'm interested to see if either of you actually did that. Just throw out a game that you think people should be watching.
I did have one, and it got postponed. Unfortunately,
that's too bad.
That
what was it?
It was Memphis, Houston.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Sam.
All right, I'll find one.
You don't have to. Don't worry about it, Steve. Do you have one that was not postponed?
I did talk about Indiana, Ohio State, and I think that's a game.
You did. You're
Saturday.
Your ghost perennial national champion Ohio State Buckeyes.
Just give them a few years and they'll be perennial.
If I give you a few years, into the early 2000s, maybe. It was 15 years ago.
It could happen again.
Yeah, maybe if Aaron Kraft comes back, but he's not coming back.
What a legend. Forgot about that guy.
I'll stay in the Big Ten and go with Iowa at Michigan State. Iowa had a couple losses, got a big win earlier this week, and Michigan State, if they're going to make a run, they need some scalps, and Iowa would be one to put on their resume for an NCAA tournament berth.
Well, there you go, guys. Games of the weekend from these two wonderful men who came on to the show today. Sam, you're a little less wonderful because of your attitude towards the episode today. I'll give you. We'll talk after the show. Anyway, for the audience, thank you guys for joining us. This has been episode 15 of the review. Hope you've enjoyed it, and let us know if there's anything else you'd like us to talk about. We'll see you on Monday, though. This has been the review.